when you have cross-functional teams and a bunch of them, whose job is it to get them all aligned? Like, is it, yeah, like, how do you think about, the answer to that question? Is it always, because I know that sometimes solving a problem can be, oh, we just need those three teams to report to the same person. That'll solve it. But is that the answer one should look for? Or, how do you get those teams, cross-functional teams specifically, to be aligned?
Yeah, I don't think you need to report to one person and treat everything as having a single decision maker, but I think you need to get at the decision level and have one clear decision owner for any given decision. So it's not necessarily that we all report up to a senior vice president and everything has to go up to like mom for the final decision. That's very unhealthy and inefficient. But for a certain decision, it needs to be very clear who owns this, who gets to make the decision, and then who are the people who need to be engaged, who need to be part of the deliberations. So I often hear teams talking about, when I say, okay, what's the unique value of this team? Like, why do you get together? What do you do? And they'll often say decision making. And I'll just stop them. I'll say, teams don't make decisions. It's not a democracy. It's hopefully not a consensus building strategy. But what I want you to do is know who's the decision maker. And then what teams do is they deliberate. So they put tension on the various different options. They come at things from different perspectives with different expertise. So cross-functional teams, the most important thing you can do is know what's the purpose of us coming together, whether it's a program, a project, a particular decision that needs to be made. Understand who's in charge of the program, the project, or the decision, who's making the calls, and then what are the different stakes and the different expertise, and what's the tension that all of the different stakeholders need to put on the deliberations. That's a much healthier team. But the vast majority of matrix situations I see, they never take the time to say who owns which decisions. They don't create the forums for people to have that sort of dynamic tension around the deliberations. So I think that's why we get into a whole lot of trouble with those cross-functional teams.
And also talking about the trust component, what are some tactical ways that you can build more trust within your teams?
Yeah. So let's go level by level. So trust is, in my world, a 4-layer cake. So let's take the bottom layer. The bottom layer of trust is just about how predictable somebody's behavior is to you, right? When even somebody who's a bit of a jerk, if you've known them for 10 years, they're predictable. It's easier to trust them. Like, I know what I'm in for. So all of the tactics around that, the best tactic around that, which is hard in a virtual world, is just breaking bread together. We know the human brain, we're animals. And when we eat beside other people, something in our brains makes us trust them more. So find downtime. It's okay to just say, we're going to have a pizza party over Zoom if you want, but we need downtime to create that first level of trust connection. Second level, credibility. So, the first level is, do I understand you? Can I predict what you're going to do? The second level is, are you up for the task? Are you capable of doing what I'm depending on you to do? So the tactics there, one of the coolest ones I've seen is a technique that was created for virtual teams. And what you do is you partner up random pairs of employees. They can be engineers or, salespeople, marketers, HR people, it doesn't matter. And you have them, answer two questions. What's something that you've cracked recently? Like something that you figured out, and what was it? And secondly, what's one thing you're still wrestling with? And then in pairs, they interview each other to share this. And it's really interesting in the research that we've seen there, we're getting massive bumps in productivity that last for months and months and months from people, first of all, just being aware of what they're solving and feeling proud of themselves, but also being aware and articulating what they're struggling with. And then they just help each other. Have you talked to so-and-so, or have you tried this? Or so that technique, as we kind of work together, share with each other, we begin to trust in one another's competence more. So that's a good one. Next.
So, sorry,
Yeah, go.
before we
Yeah.
go on to the next one, that sounds like a really fun exercise. So,
I love it.
you pair people up
Yep.
ideally from, different teams, and you say, what's something that you've recently solved? Everybody comes up with that, and then you explain it to the other person. Is
Yep.
that the idea? Okay.
Yep. Yep. So what you want is so what we're trying to counteract with this method is what's called social friction. So there's a lot of social friction, particularly if we're working remotely from one another, which means I don't even know who to ask, or I know who to ask, but in a virtual world, it's going to be a meeting scheduled 3 days from now because our calendars are so full, or just I'm worried to admit that I don't know this. So there's a lot of friction. So if we say everybody gets buddied up once a month with somebody or once a week or whatever you want, there's no social friction because everybody has to answer these two questions. So that really helps. So there's also, so that's one benefit. Second benefit, it causes you to actually reflect on what did I solve and what am I struggling with? And then it's that cross-pollination. And you can imagine if somebody tells you something they're struggling with, you might not have anything really useful to say in the moment, but 2 days later you overhear something in another meeting and you're like, oh, I know who would benefit from that. Let me hook you up. So yeah, that's the technique. You can do it within a department. So the original research looked at doing it with salespeople, and the jump in actual measurable revenue that came after this, that lasted for the entire length of the study, 9 months, absolutely profound. What's possible with this technique that just builds trust at this, it's going to help with connection as well because you're sharing, but it's really about improving people's confidence in one another's capability.